so many people that we talk to have their own personal experiences that kind of guide them to what they're doing today. I think you're in the same boat. Can you talk about your experience and how you got, interested and motivated to lead this cause of natural health?
Sure. I have 2 beautiful boys, and my youngest son, Chandler, born a couple weeks early, but healthy, happy little redheaded baby. And when he was just, I think, 2 weeks old, he was still a week before his due date that he should have been born. He was vaccinated with the hepatitis B vaccine and had a reaction. He had 3 months of crying every day and fevers and a horrible constipation that lasted for 2 years. And I was really taught by my doctors to ignore those symptoms. And they were like, oh, that's fine. Some kids are just like that. Maybe he was born a little early. Maybe he has some trouble controlling his body temperature. But if there's no runny nose or any other symptoms, he's fine. So I was taught as a mother by my physicians to ignore my son's vaccine reaction, which they never even recognized as a vaccine reaction. So I continued to just not pay attention to his health and just kind of do what everybody else did. And when he was 18 months old, he was vaccinated again with that vaccine and several others, and suffered a vaccine encephalopathy, which is brain damage, and was subsequently diagnosed with autism. And when I started figuring out how can I help him, how can I figure out exactly what happened so that I can help him get back to where he was, and started really looking at what I had been giving him in his vaccines, what the actual vaccine package insert said, what the vaccine injury compensation table that the government has that says what vaccine injuries can occur, and that my son's was on it. My doctors had never even read it and didn't know what they were giving to my son or what the consequences were. I was horrified because if I had been paying closer attention, because I asked basic vaccine questions. I said, is there mercury in this vaccine? And my doctor said, no, absolutely not. And he was very insulted that I asked. And I found out that he had lied to me. He'd never even checked. And matter of fact, the vaccines he gave my children that day had mercury in them, and they had not even gone into production with mercury-free vaccines yet. But because he was put on the spot and reacted in pride, I was lied to, and I went under the assumption that I had really I'd asked the right question, and I was being a conscientious mother. And so as I went on this journey with my son, and to heal him and get him back to where he was to start with, to learn about how much corruption was in the way and how many parents were still being lied to and how long-standing these lies had been about what really the consequences of these pharmaceuticals and the food that I was putting in my baby thinking I was doing something good for him, and what was in the water I didn't even know, and what had I really done to my son, and started a little mommy blog just talking about how to help, and then that became an angry activist blog when I was so angry about why are they doing this? Why are they lying? Because I had gone back in good faith to the American Academy of Pediatrics and CDC and asked good questions to say, hey, here's what your document says. Help me understand this because it doesn't match with what that says. And I found out they don't answer questions to parents like that. What they do is they're there to serve their officials and whoever's paying their bills, whoever, and they're not really, if they could get out of being accountable for bad consequences, they will. Therefore, why do I let them make decisions for me? Because my body, my children, my family, they're the only ones that are going to bear the consequences for a bad decision. So I need to stop handing those decisions over to bureaucrats and salesmen and doctors who are, even good doctors who are put in the middle and said, well, I won't do this for myself or my family, but if I don't do it in my practice, I'll lose my license and I want to keep my job. So they're doing things that they wouldn't even do for their own family members, and they wouldn't take. But they can't tell you that, or they'll get sued, or they'll lose their job. So that's how I came to be here. And there's so many of us in the quote-unquote autism community that our kids were poisoned in one way or another, vaccines, food, medicines, that we were given when we were pregnant and said, oh, no, it's perfectly safe. And it turns out 5 years later, there's research. And there's research before. We still have, we just had an Autism One conference 3 weeks ago, and you meet new parents whose kids are little babies who are just being diagnosed exactly with the same things that happened to your children 10 years earlier. And it's heartbreaking because nothing is changing at the top. So we have to change from the bottom up, and we have to, we've gone back to the government. People you get invited to be on blue ribbon panels, and they discuss the problems, and they show the data, and they point out the contradictions and even the things that the government is saying, or pharmaceutical manufacturers are claiming about their products. And at the end, you're patted on the head, and the decision was really already made before everybody got there. And you go through a few years of that and figure out the system is rigged. And until we have people in office who will appoint these bureaucrats that are really making the decisions, until we get people elected who will say, no, you really just can't get away with lying to the American people. I'm not okay with being a politician who allows my constituents to die, or their kids to be poisoned, or to be disabled, to stand up and do the right thing. So we have to, and when those inevitably kind of get corrupted because they get Potomac fever and kind of get sucked into the system and forget what it's really all about, then they can move on to their next thing, and we can bring somebody in who's got a fresh perspective. But it has to be, this is really something that, the health freedom movement, people who are really taking charge of their health, it's a very organic, grassroots, bottom-up movement, and it needs to move up to that next level. It needs to move up to people. We've got some really good people in Congress. We've got some good people in state legislatures, but we need everybody down from the school boards all the way up to the presidency to say, you know what, we need to. This is not about the American people. Are not a market. They're not consumers. They're citizens. They're people. They're humans who need to be respected, and their rights need to be respected. We do not need to force them into this model or that. So we're excited. As soon as we start talking about it, in the analogy of the canaries in the coal mine, people get it, because everybody has got sick kids. I went to a picnic, and it was going to be 4th of July, and we were going to be the disabled family, and I was ready to, okay, you can't talk about disability stuff, you can't talk about, health stuff. This is, and there were 5 families there, and it turned out every single family had a son with a developmental problem, and another child that was sick, and we ended up talking shop the whole time. And it's everywhere you go. I can't go to order printing materials without having a half-hour conversation with the guy who's shipping it to me, who has been looking for a diagnosis for his wife for 10 years. They just, everybody's sick, and we have to take control.